To discuss the real issues affecting the Tasman nations, this is Trad Tasman Talk, jointly produced by the Unshackled.net and rightminds.nz. Now, here's Tim Wilms in Australia and Dieuwe Boer in New Zealand.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week of Trad Tasman Talk. It's Tim Wilms here in Melbourne, where it is 7:10.
And it is 9:10 here in Auckland. And I am Dieuwe Boer for Right Minds NZ. And it is good to be back for another live stream. And it's good to see the chat is already 10 minutes ahead of us.
Yes, we are making a habit of starting roughly 10 minutes late. And that's because, well, we always want to download at last minute videos and photos that we want to display to you, because ultimately we find the show so much better if we share them with you, and it helps to, well, we don't, instead of us just reinterpreting what somebody said, you get to see it for yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
My descriptions are not always as good as the real thing.
So hello to everyone in both the Unshackled and Right Minds YouTube chats, and also on the Tim Wilms D Live. Of course, we are on Entropy as well, the YouTube enhanced software. I put the link into the chats where you can ask a question or send through a super chat. We have a Q&A towards the end of the show.
And the vaccine rollout has finally been announced here in New Zealand. So we have a supposed timetable as to when.
And you're going all in with the Pfizer vaccine.
Yes, so 100% Pfizer, as we discussed last week. But what was very interesting about the schedule you see here is that you've got 1A and 1B, which are the border workers, which are apparently done. 2, you get the frontline workers, their families, etc., etc. And then you get down to people at the lower end of 2B. You get down to people living in high-risk locations, which includes the county's Manukau District Health Board. So that's South Auckland. So if you are in residential care, or you are at least older or have relevant health conditions, then, for instance, if you're obese or so, then you are first in line, or at least in line before anybody else. So South Auckland is a very high target here, and you're seeing the special allocation of 40,000 vaccines specifically to Māori and Pacifica providers to distribute. Then you get into May, before the general population age 70 plus, 65 plus, and then we get into 3C, people with underlying health conditions or disabilities, and that's about 730,000. And right at the end of there, you see at the end of the description is a final sentence that says, this also includes people who are pregnant. So if you have if you're pregnant, then you have an underlying health condition or disability. So pregnant women are now disabled, but also there are no more pregnant women. You're now pregnant people, because the men who are pregnant will also be prioritized for the vaccine. And then the lucky remainder of the population, of course, gets to wait at least half a year. So that's the positive side of this.
For those who, because there's been a lot of protests in Australia this year against mandatory vaccinations, but the way the rollout is going, and as we're going to get into the side effects that they're discovering with these vaccines, I mean, and you and I were at the last stage, we're part of the rest of the population. So we really don't have to worry about being coerced into a vaccine for quite some while. We can just, because we know that regardless of whether we take the vaccines, the lockdowns aren't going to end.
Exactly.
they're still going to be strict.
The third wave is happening in Europe
strict
right
border
now.
border controls in terms of not just international but intrastate travel. And also, you're still going to have to wear a mask, still going to have to check in everywhere with the QR codes. It's not. They'll probably the vaccine that you and I will be coerced into taking probably hasn't even it doesn't even exist yet.
No, and before they get all of them delivered here in New Zealand, that timeline there, I believe to be incredibly aggressive. I would be surprised if by July it's available to the general population.
We're not going to make
our in the future, and then on top of that, by the time they get around to it even being available to you, you're talking about it possibly even being a year, 2 years away. And obviously, it's going to be a yearly thing too. So once you've signed up, you've got to go and get it every single year. You're committing to taking it yearly for the rest of your life. That's why the few protests that have been held against mandatory vaccinations have been very small and fizzled out to a large extent, simply because the threat of that happening is non-existent. It exists only in memes and the wishes of some media elites and perhaps a few business people super keen to get back to normal, but they just don't realize it's not going to happen. That's the final word on this.
We had 2 hotel quarantine leaks on the weekend, one in Sydney, one in Brisbane. The one in Sydney was a hotel quarantine security guard who had been vaccinated, but we're told there's a lag between when you become immune.
Same story we had last week with the Air New Zealand worker on the show. So you heard it here first. Yeah. So it goes on, and that's it. So anyway, that's the gist of the vaccine rollout in Auckland. That was announced with little fanfare, and I haven't heard a peep about it since, because people realize, this is we can't even start forcing people. We can't coerce people into this for at least a long while yet.
Yes, they can't even get through the people who
want it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, New Zealand is all in with the Pfizer vaccine, which the main logistical issue with that, it needs to be basically cryogenically frozen at minus 70 degrees. Australia is pretty much mostly all in with the AstraZeneca vaccine. 53 million doses the federal government has locked in, and 50 million is going to be made here in Melbourne by CSL, Australian Pharmaceuticals Company. Now, it was breaking on last week's show that Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt had been rushed to hospital with an infection, and that was 2 days after he got the AstraZeneca vaccine. It was later confirmed to be cellulitis in his upper right leg, which is actually a listed potential side effect of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So he was in hospital getting fluids and antibiotics. He was discharged on Saturday. He was back in federal parliament today, and we've got a photo of him back in Canberra today. Vaccines are safe and effective. Yeah, we've been told that it's not related to the vaccine at all. It's not a side effect. And despite all the growing list of countries suspending the AstraZeneca vaccine because of blood clot issues and people dying, the federal government health authorities today, if I just bring it up here, we've got so many different things to play here. Unanimous agreement. Australia's medical experts say no evidence of AstraZeneca blood clot issue. So Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly has reassured Australians that despite suspensions of the vaccine rollout in some European countries, there is no reason to make the same decision locally. Safety is our first priority. In any large vaccine rollout, we do expect to see unusual events, and we monitor very closely and carefully for those. But this does not mean that an event that happens after vaccination has been given is indeed due to that vaccine. It's just a coincidence here. Greg Hunt told the Parliament today, despite he is definitely not a side effect, the government clearly, unequivocally, and absolutely supports the AstraZeneca rollout. Clearly, unequivocally, and absolutely. So he repeated that as well. So despite what's happened to him, and
yes,
I know.
So the UK, I mean, in Europe, you've got about 17 countries at the moment that I believe have halted it, or at least started to restrict its usage while they figure out what's going on. The UK has also said that, it's fine, everything's fine, we're going to carry on. And the reasoning, I've read through the reasoning, which is can be a good reasoning, which is to say, well, we expect this blood clots to appear in this percentage of the population, this many people on a regular basis. And so in the general population, we expect that anyway. And then if you compare that to the number who received the vaccine, and they say, oh, well, the number of blood clots is similar or lower, it's not related, except they haven't applied this consistently. So the whole past year, it's been, if you had COVID and you then died in a car accident the next week, well, then you will count it as a COVID death. So if they want to play that game, then they're going to have to be willing to play the game that, well, you take the vaccine and then you die in a car accident the next week, well, then you died of having the vaccine. We just want a little bit of consistency if we can get that.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of last year, as you correctly pointed out. If you had COVID in your system and died, you're counted as a COVID death, with the exception of George Floyd. He had previously had COVID, but was murdered because of racism, we were told. But yeah, all of these deaths after the vaccine, completely unrelated, all side effects completely unrelated. Yep. There was a pro boxer who died a few days after taking the vaccine over in the US. But and it could be completely unrelated, but you can't fault anybody for applying the same standard that's being used for the past year now, because this is the world we live in. What's actually happening doesn't matter as much as who's winning the propaganda war, as much as the post-truth society is something that they've been playing into. And now, obviously, they're having to change the rules of the game. And now suddenly everything is just coincidental, and it's causation. So correlation does not equal causation, except obviously that was something they threw out a year ago. So who wants to be the unusual event from Dr. Foster? And exactly the case. Your chance of getting COVID in New Zealand at the moment is basically zero. Your chance of having an adverse reaction is not zero. We'll let the brave volunteers go ahead. Polling in New Zealand has shown that about 60 to 70% of the population is happy to have it. So we will monitor them closely for unusual events. Scott Morrison, who, as we'll get to, is not having a good week. He said, if you're offered the AstraZeneca vaccine, take it. Though we have had Matt Canavan, who's the former federal minister for resources. He is now a Nationals backbencher. He's a member of the National Party. He's decided he's going to take up the Craig Kelly role of outspoken maverick when it comes to the COVID response and the vaccine rollout. He's actually called for the AstraZeneca rollout to be suspended. I'll just play the beginning of this.
clearly time for us to suspend the rollout here in Australia. If almost every European country is doing the same, we should heed these concerns. European countries have a longer experience with the rollout of this virus. They have a greater imminent threat of the coronavirus itself, so they don't have any incentive to glibly suspend their rollout. They're obviously doing so through legitimate concerns. It's also the case that the US has yet to approve AstraZeneca as well. And so given that we're in a country that does not face an imminent risk of coronavirus spread, that surely the prudent approach here is to suspend our rollout and just take heed of the evidence that will emerge in coming months.
Do you not have faith in it?
So obviously, that
totally illogical and irrational. How
yes. Michael McCormack, the Deputy Prime Minister and Nationals leader, said that Matt Canavan's view do not reflect the position of this government. And
exactly.
The help.
Before you carry on, one question here from Dr. Foster that I would like answered. Remind us who the Australian National Party are, and they are the junior coalition party.
Yeah, a country rural regional party.
Yeah.
So they've existed for even longer than the Liberal Party, 102 years. But they only really have representation on the eastern coast at the federal level in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. In Tasmania, South Australia, they're non-existent. And in WA, we'll get to their election result soon, their National Party does have representation at the state level, but there is not a formal coalition arrangement there. And I've also covered this before, but we in New Zealand, they've spoken about government websites being the one source of truth. On Sunday, because Scott Morrison got his second Pfizer vaccine dose. If I can just find it here. Because they've got Greg Hunt talked about that they were setting up a myth-busting unit. So they've got a COVID vaccine, is it true? The importance of credible information and answer things such as, do COVID-19 vaccines contain a microchip or any thought of tracking technology? Do they cause infertility? Will the vaccines alter my DNA? Does it cause autoimmune disease? Can COVID-19 vaccines connect me to the internet?
I haven't heard half of these before. It's good.
Yeah, but it's clear that obviously they feel the need to counter all possible theories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is going to be wild.
Yeah. But because we have not much COVID in Australia, at the moment, every Australian state and territory is open to one another. So we are one nation again. And in between sort of waves and outbreaks, another culture war issue tends to be pushed to the surface by the cultural left and the Marxists. And we've been covering it on this program for a couple of weeks. What would you call it? Me Too 2.0, Me Too 2.
Me 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was obviously triggered when Samantha Maiden of news.com.au published the testimony of former Liberal staffer Brittany Higgins, who alleges that she was raped in the office of Defence Minister Linda Reynolds by a male colleague who's no longer employed in Liberal staffing circles. The last that we know, he's in a mental health facility. So Linda Reynolds, because, well, a lot of people believe because of the fallout of the scandal, and there's a lot of questions asked about who in the government knew what. Linda Reynolds took medical leave on the advice of a cardiologist because she's got a heart condition. As I reported last week, she extended her medical leave by another 3 weeks after it got leaked to the media that she called Brittany Higgins in her office a lying cow in regard to that Brittany Higgins claim that she hadn't received appropriate support post the alleged rape. And Brittany Higgins' lawyer sent Linda Reynolds a defamation notice on Friday last week. That defamation, or I guess you could say threat or letter, was settled. So Linda Reynolds paid Brittany Higgins a compensation out of her own pocket, which Brittany Higgins donated to a sexual assault survivors charity. So, but yes, this is now culminated, added with the historical allegations against Christian Porter, with the March for Justice yesterday all around Australia, which is, the slogan is enough is enough. And so they're calling, it's hard to tell what they're calling for, just basically the feminist movement. They've always wanted more rape convictions. Their argument is that our current legal system is rigged against sexual assault survivors. There aren't enough convictions, not enough is reported. And like BLM 2.0 last year, it's whatever is proposed, it's never going to satisfy them. I mean, BLM 2.0 in between the first and second wave last year, what did that achieve, really?
No. And depending on how the trial goes, of the Derek Chauvin trial in Minneapolis, you could see a BLM wave 3 as well. So you never know.
Yes.
But obviously the it's based on your description there. It's incredibly hard to know what they want, other than, like you said, more convictions for rape. But in that case, they're going to need to find mostly peaceful nagging. Yes, yes. Well, they're going to need to find more rapists in that case, and that seems to be they don't seem to have enough of them to meet their the demand that they're claiming exists. Obviously, as you said, you had at least 1 or 2 defamation cases come out of the latest Me 3 case.
Yes,
in which case I believe one of them was on behalf of a third party anyway, so it is kind of a Me 3 in that it was not somebody who actually claimed that they were assaulted. It was somebody who claimed on their behalf posthumously that they were assaulted.
Yes, so following the Brittany Higgins allegation, Louise Milligan of the ABC said that she'd come into possession of a document from a deceased woman who alleged that she was raped in 1988 by a sitting cabinet minister, and Christian Porter later outed himself that he was the accused cabinet minister, where emphatically denied it. He was 17 at the time. This woman was 16. They were at the National Debating Championships in Sydney. And Christian Porter had already been featured in a Louise Milligan ABC Four Corners report last year, going through all the what is that, you'd say chauvinist womanizing things that he'd said in his uni days, which of course are not a hanging offense. Like, obviously he felt he fancied himself as a bit of a ladies' man in his uni days. Obviously he felt like they're embarrassing, but as I said, they're not a hanging offense, and definitely there shouldn't have been. Oh, and there was also the allegation that he was sexually inappropriate with a woman in a Canberra bar. Now, at that time, Christian Porter said he was considering his legal options. He has also taken medical leave during this time, same as Linda Reynolds. He on Monday, so the day of the March for Justice, announced that he was taking defamation action, both against the ABC and journalist Louise Milligan. This is about the article that she wrote that set off this. I guess the trauma for Christian Porter when this was all brought out. The article that he sues on made false allegations against him in relation to a person he had met when he was a teenager. Although he was not named, the article made allegations. He was easily identifiable to many Australians as the subject of the allegations. Over the past few weeks, he's been subjected to trial by media without regard to the presumption of innocence or rules of evidence and without proper disclosure of the material said to support the untrue allegations. The trial by media should now end with the commencement of these proceedings. Claims made by the ABC and Miss Milligan will be determined in a court in a procedural fair process. Mr. Porter will have and will exercise the opportunity to give evidence denying these false allegations on oath. The ABC and Miss Milligan, having published these allegations, have damaged the reputation of the Attorney General. Court process will allow them to present any relevant evidence and make any submissions they believe justifies their conduct in damaging Mr. Porter's reputation. If the ABC and Miss Milligan wish to argue truth of the allegations, they can do so in these proceedings. Now, there had been, because Christian Porter has refused to resign, stand down, the feminists and the Labor Party and Greens have been calling for an independent inquiry, which they've always wanted to be a kangaroo court. Well, now there is going to be an independent inquiry, a defamation suit in the federal court, but certainly I don't think this will satisfy them because it's still not the kangaroo court that they want.
Exactly. And in New Zealand media outlet, the BFD published an article by Australian, goes under the name of Lushington Brady, who stated that the Porter accusers are exploiting mental illness. He was actually saying that
because she struggled.
Woman, they claimed had bipolar disorder, and he gave various descriptions here from
that's
various bipolar patients.
Here we go. Here.
From various patients. He's got here, he gives various accounts of bipolar patients there, including the type of writing,
this is her writing.
And apparently that's common among people who suffer from that. And he goes in to describe how these patients actually have false memories of traumatic events that never happened, and so on. So he's saying here the media are just exploiting mental illness in this particular case purely for a political scalp.
Because as I said last week, the feminist left, they are in no way calling for the investigation into the rape allegations against former Labor leader Bill Shorten to continue. Even though his accuser, Kathy Sheriff, is still very much alive. She actually attended the Canberra March for Justice to tell her story there. So
how were things inside the Labor Party then?
Oh yes, Samantha Maiden, she published on Sunday night that female Labor staffers warn male MPs they will no longer keep their secrets. And so there's a Facebook group
admitting that they're currently covering up cases of assault, at least sexual assault and even rape, but they're no longer going to be covering those up. Is that that's what?
Well, it's a harassment and bullying. So they're in this. The allegations is he is a man who punches the wall next to his female staffer's head, calling her a effing C when she passes on news he doesn't want to hear. He is a man who calls his female colleague a pig dog when she disagrees with him and says in front of her staff, "That's why no one wants to F you." He is a man who says he'd never F a woman without a thigh gap and ask if I'll show him mine while we sit waiting for a meeting. I'm about to run to start in a room full of young men. He is a married man who piled a young woman with drinks until she has no idea what was happening. He promised others at the gathering he would get her home safely before putting her into a cab. He had sex with her when she had no ability to consent. Next day, he texted to demand she take the morning after pill and blamed her for what happened, saying she was drunk and she came on to him. He threatened to tell no one, and they go on and on and on. So yes, this is the whole thing
stuff going on in the Labour Party.
Yeah, and which is what those on the Conservative side have warned the Labour Party for wanting to play this partisan game, is that, well, as the saying goes, those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Anthony Albanese, the Labour leader, and Deputy Tanya Plibersek have urged these Labour women to come forward to say they'll be supported.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
nothing, as we have covered many times on the show, there is nobody, there's not quite anyone as gentlemanly as a male feminist.
But Scott Morrison is still the one in the political hot seat with regard to the fallout from the Me Too 2.0, because the latest news poll now has the coalition behind 48-52. Yes, I know that news poll was wrong with regard to the federal election of 2019, but ever since then, all the polls with regard to the state elections have been right. And Scott Morrison didn't help himself yesterday with this tone-deaf response to the Women's March for Justice.
It is good and right, Mr. Speaker, that so many are able to gather here in this way, whether in our capital or elsewhere, and to do so peacefully, to express their concerns and their very genuine and real frustrations. This is a vibrant liberal democracy, Mr. Speaker. Not far from here, such marches, even now, are being met with bullets, but not here in this country, Mr. Speaker. Not here in this country. This is a triumph of democracy when we see these things take place.
Yes, that's good. And a lot of people have pointed out, in Australia, for now, you're not shot when you protest.
Exactly, for now. Be thankful that your government is not shooting you. That's certainly... Yes. That's a that's a privilege that we could all celebrate today.
Yes, it's a very low bar. Well, at least you're not, being shot when you protest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in defence of Scott Morrison, he did offer to meet the organisers of the Women's March for Justice in private. He wasn't going to address the rally, but they rejected it, saying, no more in secret. That was there. So, but we'll see where this goes. I have a feeling it's going to, as I said, because what justice do they want? It'll probably fizzle out the same way that BLM 2.0 did, or the imported version in Australia. Does anyone remember Black Lives Matter Australia in between the first and second wave? We do remember that it was in Melbourne, a super spreader event before the second wave, even though the Victorian government said that they couldn't find any evidence that there was infection from there, which, of course, it's always, if there's an event that you approve of or like, it's COVID safe. You wear a mask, you're immune from the virus. But if it's an event or protest you don't like, it's a super spreader event.
Exactly.
The March for Justice yesterday all around Australia, they clearly broke the coronavirus public gathering restrictions, but they were COVID safe.
Yeah, that was fine, obviously. Moving along to somebody else who's in the hot seat at the moment, perhaps like Scott Morrison, Jacinda Ardern here in New Zealand is similarly not doing too well. We've just had the most recent poll the first one of this year, I believe. We don't have them very, very frequently between elections outside of the election cycle. And
there it is there.
we are seeing, very good, we're seeing the Labour Party is down under 50% now, 49%. Obviously, that's still enough to govern by themselves, in no real trouble there. The National Party is still floundering at under 30%. Green Party and ACT both there just below 10%, and a few of the other parties outside of Parliament are fairly steady. Obviously, the Māori Party is up to 2% from their 1% result in the election, due to getting lots of headlines that we've covered on the show. But the most shocking one actually is not in this article, listed here in this article here, but in the other link that I've got. I'll just read those numbers out. Preferred Prime Minister rankings. Jacinda Ardern is down 15% to 43%. She was up to 58% preferred Prime Minister in December 2020. So that's now 3-4 months ago. And she's managed to drop down to 43%. So that's the hit that she's taken over the repeated Auckland lockdowns, getting into trouble, getting into a fight with a KFC worker, shifting blame every single time that she's had the opportunity to shift blame. And now in the past few weeks, no longer fronting up to the press conferences, cancelling media appearances. And in fact, the past few days, I don't believe we've seen anything of her other than for her to say, oh, whenever asked about whatever scandal, this is not.
Why doesn't she just say she's sick?
Who knows? It may still come to that. But yeah, it's certainly the case where only she's just she's fighting KFC workers. She's been blaming KFC workers for spreading coronavirus. When in fact they did everything they were told to do, but they didn't do what she had been thinking. So whatever she'd been trying to telepathically communicate to them to do, they hadn't done. And so she got very, very angry with them. Which apparently is not good for your ratings as Prime Minister. People seem to think that you're acting a little bit weird when you do that.
Well, it was the same during Victoria's second wave, when it was Dan Andrews' government's incompetence with the hotel quarantine that caused the second wave, where he blamed ordinary Victorians for not following the rule. But we now have Dan out of action for at least 6 weeks after his fall last Tuesday, where it was breaking news, or somewhat breaking news. He has broken ribs and fractured vertebrae. So originally he was going to be out for a few weeks. Now it's at least 6 weeks, and his rehabilitation could take at least 3 months, even six or 9 months. And well, for Victorians such as myself, it's been absolute bliss not seeing Dan's mug anywhere, apart from this photo of him. This was when he was still at the Alfred. He's now rehabbing at home. This is him there, and everyone's noticed that this photo it cuts off most of his body. Mm-hmm. And there's been various people who believe that the whole photo has been fake. There's been a lot of psychoanalyzing of this photo, and also lots of theories as well about the story that we've been told, that he was getting ready for work and slipped on some wet stairs and fell down.
Mm-hmm. At least for New Zealand too, seeing less of the Prime Minister makes me very, very happy. The less we see of our politicians, the less they're doing, the happier I am. But yes, the the infamous dictator Dan, whether he's out of action for long, we shall see.
And we have obviously at the federal level a sick ward with Linda Reynolds, Christian Porter, and last week Greg Hunt on the sick bed. But now Dan Andrews joins his police and emergency services minister, Lisa Neville, who has taken 3 months sick leave because of Crohn's disease, which is an inflammation of the bowel. And I'm not sure if she's properly recovering, given that she was snapped in Port Douglas, guzzling down the wine. Port Douglas in far north Queensland, not Victoria, and guzzling down that wine. She's known for having a few drinks, particularly when Victoria is turning to shit. So that can't be good for a bowel.
No, that's it's just the wine it sort of helps with digestion and things like that, doesn't it? So who knows?
Yes. So we have 2 Victorian cabinet ministers down. So we have James Molino, the deputy premier. He's now the acting premier. He's a lot of people have mockingly referred to him as Mini Dan, because he's just going to be the same as Dan, but he's much shorter. And I should also say, because obviously the signature policy of the Andrews government has been baby killing, knocking off old people with euthanasia and LGBT cultural Marxism. Dan Andrews claims to be a Catholic. So does James Molino. Now, to be fair, he voted against abortion and euthanasia, but he's the education minister, and so has voted for all of the cultural Marxism in schools. So he doesn't get there. So we supposedly have in Victoria a Catholic premier and deputy premier.
Yes, that seems to be a big problem elsewhere too, with the at least you do certainly have the ubiquitous liberal Catholics and Protestants who seem to be getting at least doing all they can do to promote the Marxist or some kind of neo-pagan agenda, and then kind of washing their hands of it. It's okay.
Now, why Dan's off in recovery, the Victorian Liberal Party, because they've been, a lot of people have been unsatisfied with opposition leader Michael O'Brien's performance. And so there was attempted spill this morning in the Victorian Liberal Party room, which failed. If I just put it up here, so this was the headline by Tony Wright from the Age. Liv serve up a dose of slapstick to tickle Dan Andrews' ribs. So Michael O'Brien survived the spill motion 22-9. The person who moved the spill motion was Brad Batten, who's a Liberal frontbencher. Most people, even amongst who are familiar with Victorian politics, wouldn't have heard of him. He represents an outer suburban southeast Melbourne seat. I think his main advantage over Michael O'Brien is height, because he is much taller. Because both O'Brien and his predecessor there, Matthew Guy, they both, because they're both short, they come across as pipsqueaks when they're complaining about Dan's government. Because this was basically Brad Batten spilled this on surprise, that's why it failed. There is a campaign to get Matthew Guy back to the leadership, because he has been much better during his wilderness period. But as is the history in Australian politics, it normally takes a failed spill motion to wound a leader, and then the second one delivers the fatal blow. Former Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett, who is supporting a leadership change, he called the failed spill motion foreplay, which I guess is accurate and sort of a creepy analogy.
That's Australian politicians and the creepiness seems to go hand in hand these days. So we'll just leave it at that. One last thing on Jacinda before we carry on to the next topic. She did have some good news this week, and she did have an insect named after her. Actually, because the finder, discoverer of this insect thought that it had a striking resemblance with Jacinda Ardern, which is why just waiting for it to come up on screen.
Yeah.
There we go. So a new discovery of a bright red weta, a fairly large creature, and definitely incredibly ugly and slimy and annoying creatures that tend to make people scream when they accidentally see them unexpectedly. So there you go. Apparently she was very grateful and flattered to have this insect named after her too. So some good news.
Everyone had their money on a breed of horse that she would be named after.
And the big news item in New Zealand the past few weeks, at least in the soft on crime crim hugger circles, has been that of the 501 deportees. There was a story last week before our show then, and we didn't actually cover it last week, but it's had a lot of development since then. It was an Australian reporter.
In New Zealand, Australia, it hasn't made the news.
Oh yeah, it hasn't.
Yeah, because
Peter Dutton is involved in the story.
Yes,
obviously,
they were.
he has to get interviewed by New Zealand media.
Yeah, this was on 9 News Brisbane last Monday, the 8th.
Very few people in New Zealand would have seen the clip. We've just seen
revealing the secret prisoner plane booting foreign criminals out of Australia. From murderers to child abusers, these people have no place in our country. Crime reporter Jordan Fabris is taking you on board.
An Airbus jet taxiing down the runway, pulling up on the far side of the Brisbane International Airport, out of the way of prying eyes. It's a ghost flight. No markings, just an Australian flag on the tail. But for a small handful of people, no one knows about the top secret charter, or more importantly, where it's going.
How does it feel to be kicked out of Australia?
Welcome aboard Australia's Conair. Every seat taken, this plane is full with the worst of the worst.
If you do commit a serious crime here in Australia, not only will you do your time, you will be deported from this country.
Murderers, child abusers, drug runners, bikies, they've all outstayed their welcome.
Our country doesn't want you. Are you excited to go home?
The secret operation is run by the Australian Border Force. These foreign nationals have had their visas shredded after being convicted of serious crimes. Straight out of jail, they are handcuffed and marched onto the plane.
This is the first Queensland deportation flight of 2021. They go all over the world, including to the United Kingdom. All of the criminals on this plane have a one-way ticket to New Zealand.
This passenger, Grant David Mitchell, was once one of Australia's most wanted. He choked his girlfriend to death in Sydney in the 80s and remained on the run in North Queensland for 20 years.
We're talking about the most serious offenders here, and our country's safer for having deported them.
Conair picks up its prisoners from major cities all over Australia. In Melbourne, cold-blooded killers Edwin Andrew Lewis and Bruce Savage were escorted on, alongside Gavin Lou Boyton, a bikie drug runner. Sex offender Jamie Roy McKee got his marching orders in Sydney, and here on the tarmac in Perth, 2 criminals whose identities are classified.
Over the course of the last 12 months or so, Border Force has been able to deport over 700 people.
There are women on board too. Some are happier to be booted out than others.
Part of the Australian Border Force responsibilities include protecting the Australian community from these individuals.
One of the most infamous criminals deported is the fake Tahitian prince Joel Barlow. Border Force escorting him on a flight back to his homeland 2 years ago after serving 6 years jail for defrauding the Queensland government of more than $16 million.
It's taking the trash out, then we can make Australia a safer place.
After 3 hours in the air, Conair touches down at Auckland International Airport. The unwanted passengers no longer Australia's problem. Jordan Fabris, 9 News.
And as an Australian, I can say amen.
And I don't blame you either. Obviously, I'm not happy to have them, but that's the way it is. And well, we had a Green MP react to this. If you want to bring up that Stuff article, which has the headline.
Sorry, that's the
other one.
current
Yeah. We'll talk about that one in a minute too. But the I'll go through that one first. So the we obviously heard Dutton call them trash in that article.
Here we go.
Which really offended some of others. There you go. So that's the Golriz Gaharaman, the fake refugee who embellished her CV and ended up defending war criminals, complained that Australia is acting like a rogue nation and that New Zealand needs to go and complain to the United Nations because as part of these deportations, a 15-year-old was deported back to New Zealand, and they claimed that Australia was making this poor child an orphan. Except we don't know the full details of this case, other than in order to qualify for the for deportation, you have to be sentenced to over a year in prison for incredibly serious.
Yeah, and if they're deporting a 15-year-old, they've probably done something really bad.
You can just imagine what a 15-year-old had to do to get to that level.
It's not like they stole a candy bar from the local supermarket.
No, exactly. So, most certainly not. So that's the bizarre, the expected reaction from the Greens. Like I said, they love their criminals and are very, very upset when these poor murderers and rapists and other violent offenders have, they've just like made a few mistakes, and we should forgive them, and Australia should let them run around its streets, and New Zealand should let them run around the streets, and everything will be fine. That's the attitude they take. Our foreign minister made a similarly retarded statement. If I'm can quote it verbatim from the bottom of this article here. Foreign Minister Nania Matuta was more prepared to weigh in on Dutton's language, saying that his comments only serve to trash his own reputation, which seems like a fairly idiotic comment to make.
Yeah, I'm sure that Dutton is, he's going to be really cut by that. And the COVID-19 response minister and health minister, Chris Hipkins, made a faux pas, which was actually very, very funny, because he said, and I quote, this is Australia exporting its garbage to New Zealand. Their criminal offending has been in Australia. Many of them have lived the vast bulk of their lives in Australia. This is a deplorable move by the Australian government. But then he immediately realized that he had called these people garbage, which is what they are. And then he had to go and apologize for referring to these people as garbage. So that's the state. That's the state of New Zealand's ruling parties at the moment, and what absolutely, these are the disgusting people who run our government, and they love criminals very, 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 very much. And all that happens, like the reason Australia keeps doing this is because all that happens in response. Jacinda has a bitch, so do other MPs, but you accept these crims back. So of course, if it's easy for us to deport our problems, we will. And basically the Morrison government and Peter Dutton have learned, well, what are you going to do about it? Just beat your chest, bitch and moan, then nothing.
And that's exactly it. The opposition leader, I'm completely forgetting her name already.
Judith Collins.
Judith Collins, there we go. She has said, well, this is obviously fair for Australia to do, and we should just do the same back as well. Although, on the whole, I was talking about the polling before. She's not polling too great anyway herself. 8% in the preferred prime minister rankings, down from 12% last time. There's not really anybody in any politicians that people are keen on at the moment. Basically a third of voters in that most recent poll didn't have a preferred prime minister. So you've got a huge section of New Zealand's voter base who are actually at this point in time not keen on any of our garbage politicians. So we'll keep an eye on that space and see what happens. But currently, the usual as we expect from our politicians. There's certainly not. No alternatives being offered. No actual improvements being made, and we are basically just suffering through this, and everybody's sort of waiting to see what happens.
Yes, you're certainly in. Well, there's not many voting. Well, you've just had an election, which,
Exactly.
Jacinda won in a landslide, and we've seen the pro lockdown parties in the Tasman nations.
Exactly, winning easily. I believe in your recent elections as well, local elections. They're incredibly popular, incredibly popular with the majority, and the sizable minority who disagrees is sort of like, I guess we'll just get on with our lives as best as we can with a jackboot on our necks.
Yes, the Western Australian state election was this past Saturday, where Mark McGowan, the Labor Premier, his signature COVID control policy was the hard border with the rest of Eastern Australia. He had approval ratings in the high 80s, low 90s. The last news poll before the election said, had two-party preferred as 66 to 34. And everyone's like, I don't think it'll be that lopsided on the night. But it was. The results played out as the polls suggested. So there's still only 63% counted, but it's pretty much going to stay around about here. So there's 59 seats in the WA Legislative Assembly. ALP so far, this is the ABC, have called 50 for the Labor Party, 2 for the Liberal Party, and 4 for the National Party. So the WA Liberal Party won't even get party status at presently. You need 5 to get party status, and the WA National
opposition party.
Well, WA National, they'll be the biggest opposition party there. The WA Liberal leader, Zach Kirkup, he lost his seat of Dawesville. He had a absolute shocker of a campaign with his signature policy being having the state carbon neutral by 2030, a resources state based on mining. It was called an upside down election, given that the WA Liberals tried to outgreen the Greens. And when it comes to economic matters, the McGowan Labor government is quite economically conservative. They're not big spenders. You'd say they're economically conservative, socially liberal. They're not full cultural Marxists like they are in Victoria. And it also looks like the WA Labor Party will get control of the Legislative Council, the upper house there at the moment. So there's 36 seats in the upper house there. It's based on proportional representation. So at the moment, predicted to win 23. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with there's only 2 states that have group voting tickets in the upper house now, which is WA and Victoria. It used to have it in the Australian Senate. It's where you put a 1 above the line and the preferences go where the party decides. Mm-hmm. And so this is why, for the moment, you have the Daylight Savings Party, or this is the pro-Daylight Savings Party, predicted to get a seat at the moment. They want WA to introduce daylight savings with the majority of Australians. And the Legalised Cannabis WA Party also looks like, or is projected to win a seat at the moment. At the moment, in the 2 existing crossbenchers, the Tudors, Fishers and Farmers Party and Liberal Democrats, aren't projected to win a seat, but we'll see for the final count, because they've got to count the below the lines there. But it doesn't really matter, because absolute power, the West Australian Labor Party and Mark McGowan have. And, Zach Kirkup lost his seat. There's going to be, on predicted, just 10 in the WA Liberal Party room, 3 in the lower house, 7 in the upper house. A lot of people are saying that because Zach Kirkup was only 34 years old. He's given a hospital past the poison chalice after the previous leader, Lisa Harvey, resigned. She lost her seat of Scarborough. What was the end of her leadership was she wanted WA to open up with the rest of Australia. And basically, to sum up the demise of her political career, she did a live cross from Channel 7 up against a poster of attacking her, wanted to open WA's borders and backed by Clive Palmer. So,
yeah.
So she could not afford a media minder who would say, "Hey, don't do the live cross there."
Yeah, I know. And yeah, it seems like there is no actual opposition in Western Australia. Like, it is just a joke at the moment, which obviously explains the election result. Yeah, that's the way it is. I did see, at least did One Nation have any representation there, or?
Oh, they did. They did have 3 seats. I should say.
But obviously, with the borders now closed, there's no reason for One Nation to exist anymore.
Yeah, because that One Nation is pro internal borders. But people are voting just for border closures, period. Doesn't mean if it's international or state. Exactly. And the same thing happened with the Queensland state election, which Anastasia Palaszczuk, Labor Premier, won comfortably. A lot of the One Nation voters voted for her because of her border closure with New South Wales, and One Nation was wanting to open the border with New South Wales. Yeah. So this is why it's called upside down elections. Exactly. The lesson of the past year is any sort of border works or is electorally popular.
Certainly. And we are up against the hour now. Was going to do a little primer on the Dutch elections happening at the moment. I believe they finish voting tomorrow. We probably get results sort of midday Friday on that, but I think we'll leave it out for tonight.
Well, you're more interested than me.
Talk about the results
with your
Dutch I guess so. I thought I will have something else to talk about. Sometimes people enjoy some politics away from the Tasman, but I'll try and do a little short version on that. Currently, it's looking like the ruling coalition may just squeak back in. The main Liberal Party, same thing as in Australia, or Liberal National Party, looks to be picking up extra votes. And the everyone's favourite politician here, Geert Wilders, as most people will know him as, will be picking up a few extra seats probably, but we'll see how it goes. And it's not looking like much will change over there. Similar situation as we've seen elsewhere.
Still lockdown.
The lockdowns win, and that's, I think, what we're going to see in the Netherlands as well. But if there's anything interesting to report there, we'll talk about it next week, and we'll call it a night. And if anybody, I guess if you want to, I'm currently not posting much elsewhere, other perhaps on Telegram is about it. I'm trying to do less at the moment, and I've got a bit of a backlog of things to write. So
I'm the same.
See you guys next week, basically. So I don't know if you're doing a few other shows this week.
I've got Wilms Front tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time on the Wilms Front YouTube and D-Live. My guest, is somebody Stephen Berry, who is it's a New Zealand libertarian activist, but not the lolbert cucked type.
And, no, right-wing libertarian. Yeah.
Obviously, with you're a free market social conservative is probably the best way to describe you. There's more
close enough.
Yes. There's more. I guess I can have a more libertarian focused New Zealand discussion with Stephen.
I'm sure that will be interesting.
He's currently hosting the Mr. Berry show on his YouTube channel. Lots
New
of
Zealand's
Berry
most controversial. I see here. Very good. Yeah, so some people are keen. I see Origin not so keen. Most annoying online voice. And
people say I have the most annoying online voice.
And Ardern, you spelt his name wrong. It's spelt the Christian way with a PH. So anyway, that's all for tonight, folks. We'll see you next week. Usual time. We'll try not to be too late. And have a good week, everyone. And may it be as uneventful as this past week, at least in terms of bad things that affect you directly. So
yeah, and let's hope our politicians keep hiding, running away, or in the forward.
Certainly. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Trad Tasman Talk. To keep up with the latest real news and analysis from the Tasman nations, visit the Unshackled.net and rightminds.nz.